The Pies Nation podcast is proudly brought to you by Swish Personalised Videos. Give the Collingwood fan in your life the ultimate surprise, whether it be for birthdays, sledging, or a big celebration. A personalised video from their favourite Pies star is a gift like no other because these videos hit harder than any standard gift. And Jack, there are so many options to choose from on Swish. I reckon somebody underrated that I'd love to get a video from would be DC. Not only is he having a great season on the field, but we know what he's like off field.
Yes, he would be value for money for sure, Nico DC. He's an absolute character. But yeah, Swish is an amazing platform, Nico. So easy to use. I've been on the reciprocating end of a Swish video, and someone like Darcy Cameron would have been perfect, but I instead got stitched up with a Matt Owies from Carlton. So that was great.
Slightly better now because he's not at Carlton anymore.
Yeah, for sure. I actually dislike Carlton slightly less because of that. So yeah.
Anyway, so for our followers and our listeners and our viewers of the Pies Nation podcast, a great offer here for you. 10% off if you use the code PiesNation at swish.com. So keep an eye out for a link at our video description or wherever you get your podcast as well. 10% off if you use the code PiesNation. Some great value there to get many players at the Collingwood Football Club, thanks to Swish, who are proudly sponsoring our podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pies Nation podcast, where the Pies are hot and the drinks are cold. Nicholas Sacco here, your host once again. This is episode 5, take 2 of season 7, or episode 178 if you are counting from the beginning. What was business as usual, though, was the Mighty Pies getting the job done last Thursday night against the Blues, taking care of them in front of a big MCG crowd to not only send them to 0-4, but to also keep our winning run intact. Today, we'll get you up to speed with how last Thursday went down, because it does seem like an eternity ago. Maybe not for all Collingwood supporters, because we know just how much we love beating Carlton. We'll discuss plenty of topics, including goal kicking. That was a big one, thanks to AskPiesNation. And, of course, praise our VFL boys with our VFL report after they picked up another win over the weekend. And, well, Marcus, great to have you, first and foremost, back on the couch with everything working.
Thank you, Nico. Good to be back.
And Jack, his first appearance on the couch in our new studio. Welcome, mate.
I know. How good are the new digs, in the word of a great man named Derek, who we are going to sorely miss, but excited for the next chapter in Pies Nation to come, as Marcus just opens up a can there.
Well, what drink are we rolling with there,
Coconut water there, mate.
Coconut water.
Nice.
Okay.
Very nice.
I don't think we've ever had that rolling in a podcast, but that's okay.
Everything.
As I said, Thursday does seem like an eternity ago. Maybe for some games when we play different opponents, but when we do play the Blues, as dull of a game as that was, it does still stick in the memory at time. And it was fantastic to see us get to work in the second half and get the job done, Marcus.
Yeah, we look at these games as what's happened over time, and I believe we're now 5 ahead on the win-loss record, and it's always nice to remind ourselves that we're just starting to break away, and I think there could be a few more wins to come in a row in seasons to come, Nico, with the shape of that football club. It was an ugly game, but beautiful for us, Jack.
Yeah, it was beautiful in the end. Frustrating throughout, though, Nico. I've got to admit, I was very stressed in that last quarter, and also a bit perplexed of what we got dished up from Carlton. I wouldn't mind taking an opportunity just to revel in how really poor they are as a football club at the moment, the Carlton Footy Club, because this was a game where they had every reason, every opportunity to come out firing, and for the better part of a half they did, but as soon as the heat was turned up from our boys, they just could not handle it. They capitulated, and they are 0-4 in season 2025 with what I think is one of the best lists in the comp, albeit missing Harry Mackay. And a couple of young guns, but apart from that, they've got the makings of what should be a really good footy team, but they just seem mentally fragile, and as soon as they get pushed, they have no ability to cope with it. And I was honestly just perplexed, watching the third quarter unfold the way it did. I was really impressed with our efforts, but to have no fight and no pushback from that was just amazing. And it is amazing in the sense that I just love it, and I'm loving seeing how bad they are at the moment.
They are falling apart very quickly, Marcus, and to see a team put the white flag up after all the scrutiny they've gone through over the last month, I wouldn't like being a Carlton supporter as is, but for what they've seen over the last 3 or 4 weeks, it's disgraceful.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better anytime soon. And we could probably do a whole segment as to how much joy we get from watching the old
You got time?
arch rivals. Yeah. But it is a Collingwood podcast, and I do think we need to focus our attention on what our boys did well. And we did speak about how this needed to be a mature performance. We spoke about how this is just one of those games, despite all the rivalry, just need to come in, get the job done. It was ugly, probably one of the worst games of footy I've watched for some time, despite the inclement weather. But I thought we showed a lot of ticker to just get it done in the third quarter and break the game open. Probably should have won by about how many goals, Nico?
It felt like a 40-point win, didn't it? With the way that we were playing.
Even with the conditions, some woeful goal kicking, which I think will be probably one of the sour notes on this win, but a win nonetheless.
Absolutely. Well, let's start praising our players, as we always do, with the pie that caught our eye. And again, plenty to choose from this week, boys, which I think is always a positive sign.
For sure, and I think with the clamps being on Nick, as we're kind of getting used to, we're seeing performances from other players that are becoming more consistent. I think Josh Daicos has started really strongly this year. It wasn't the pie that caught my eye, but and Darcy Cameron, I'm sure he might feature in some votes this week after a huge effort on Tom de Koning. But pie that caught my eye this week was Harry Perryman. Okay. And it's 20 disposals, 1 goal, 1. Not the greatest stat sheet of all time, but it's the approach at the football. And he showed me that he's a wet weather player, blue collar type of operator, and just loved his grunt through the middle. Not necessarily picking the ball up every time, but when other players, particularly from the Blues, sort of contested branded style of footy, were trying to get some ascendancy at the stoppage, he was just barreling forward and just, a kick here, a fingernail there. I love those sorts of players that just help us cover more ground and win that territory battle. So Harry Perryman for mine.
He was superb in a lot of senses, I think. So he had 8 tackles, which we've come to expect from him over the last few weeks as a Magpie. His first goal as a Collingwood player, which was a nice moment early in that first quarter.
Out of nothing.
Played a role on Cripps throughout the match. We saw at times Pendlebury and Sidebottom stick to him, but Harry Perryman did have a role with him at times. Paddy Cripps only had 1 clearance for the entire match, which
massive
is unheard of, and speaks volumes of just how locked in we were in trying to limit the influence of his game, because we know how much he can will that Carlton side over the line at times. But you're right, I thought Perryman was sensational.
No doubt. So looking forward to seeing him in a variety of roles this year, and for him to basically come in and I think alleviate a bit of that time that Pendle spends at times on bigger body midfielders. It was exceptional from Perryman. Pie that caught your eye, Jack.
Pie that caught my eye was in fact our skipper Darcy Moore. Nico spoke about him. A few times
you've done this now with Darcy.
Yeah, spoke about him at the start of the season as someone that needed to lift and needed to have a massive year, and I think it's fair to say up until this point in the year he has been really consistent and really solid, and hopefully that can continue throughout season 2025. But the reason why I wanted to highlight Darcy Moore is I feel like when he's playing well, you see certain consistencies in his game. We all know the conscious leaving of your man, not being out of position, the breaking through lines off halfback flank, and propelling us into attack. But I thought the one that caught my eye for me on Thursday night was his kicking, which is an area of Darcy's game that probably, I'm sure he would admit, isn't his go-to, and perhaps lets him down every now and again. But I thought on Thursday it was extremely solid, and it wasn't just the kicks going sideways or that make us very nervous. Marcus kicking backwards inside 50, or indeed when he's kicking out, was the big long bombs that really cleared it, the lines for us on a wet, cold night, and I thought it was immense. And yeah, I thought Darcy Moore, finished with 17 disposals, went at 76% efficiency. Now, speaking off air, Nico, the AFL have had him as spending 100% of game time on the ground as well, which I thought was quite remarkable. But I have been told since then that it was a glitch, but that would have been quite the effort. But yeah, Darcy Moore, his game for mine is trending the right way it should be to get back to that All-Australian defender we know he can be, which was only 2 seasons ago. So yeah, signs looking good for Darcy.
David King said post-game that he felt it was his best game for Collingwood in a little while, particularly after coming off an All-Australian year a couple of years ago. And you were spot on about his kicking. Yes, 17 disposals at a good efficiency, but he had nearly 500 metres gained with those kicks, so they were effective and they were utilised accordingly, which is a great sign for Darcy Moore. I had so many options to choose for the pie that caught my eye, and I think we're going to discuss some of the boys in a bit more detail, Darcy Cameron being one of those which I feel like we really need to touch on. So I'll avoid him in this instance. I went with Ned Long because I think we have now come to a point where as much of an impact he is having as our sub, I think we need to be seeing him play some more consistent football in his senior side. He came on and played 25% game time, so pretty much the entirety of the last quarter. And he still had 6 disposals, 3 tackles, 11 pressure acts, and was able to hit the scoreboard with a goal as well. He's a phenomenal footballer and someone that I feel like has been in the system already for 50 to 100 games, let alone the fact that he's just come in playing the sub role really well, which is fantastic. And even against the Bulldogs a fortnight ago, with 75% time on ground, he still had 28 pressure acts, 4 score involvements, 9 tackles and 13 disposals. In my eyes, he belongs in the starting 22, and I hope we're not far away from seeing that, gents.
Yeah, look, some of the stuff he's done in the last couple of weeks, like I don't remember if the kick you did in the last game we played where he just like it was an absolute laser from like the flank to the hot spot. I can't remember who he hit up, but it was just like, what the hell? I didn't know he had that in him. He just like threw the shoe at it. And then to come into this game and kick basically goal of the game, check side with his first kick and once he'd been injected to the match was incredible. So he's another one that's a massive watch because he's got some serious size and he can throw his body around. He can stand up in tackles. So in life after Pendlebury, I think that having that big body midfielder is something we can really look towards Ned Long as being a reliable option for.
And listening to Fly after the game, Nico, I think it's clear that Ned Long's about to make that transition from being our starting sub, so to speak, to making his way into the starting 22. I think we've got too many sample sizes over short periods to not just let him loose across 4 quarters. He seems too valuable to not have him in that side from the first bounce, and I'm excited to see what he can do across 4 quarters of footy. The headache then becomes who does he come out for, who does he come in for? A few injury concerns off air just before we jumped in front of the mics tonight, so that'll be interesting to see how our structure looks, but was so impressed with his game. To come in on a cold night, that can't be easy as a high performance athlete to come in those conditions and perform the way he did. It was exceptional. So looking forward to seeing what that looks like over 4 quarters.
It looks like he will be getting some opportunities to do that. We're going to touch on those injuries that have just popped up. Marcus probably has no idea what we're talking about, but some injury news has just dropped at Collingwood and we'll touch on that.
Breaking news.
That's what we are at Collingwood. Let's touch on the game in a little bit more detail. I'll get back to individualising some of those standouts in a moment, but I do want to chat about that second half because, as you said, Marcus, off the top, we went to work after half time and it felt like Carlton were, forcing us to play their game where it was very contested. Tackle numbers were pretty high, but it suited them to a T and that allowed them to stay in the contest. But they say that the third quarter is a premiership quarter for a reason, boys, and gee, we went to work. 59% scores per inside 50, 12 more contested possessions, 8 more clearances, 10 more inside 50s, and we scored 4 goals from forward half intercepts in the second half. So it's clear, yes, you can talk about Carlton and their lack of energy in that second half, but I don't think it can be diminished just how important it was for us to get our game going and put the pressure on Carlton to a point where they were either kicking it on the full every 5 or 6 kicks or forcing turnovers to allow us to go in and attack.
It was a game of 2 halves, no question about it. The Blues unfortunately only turned up for the first half, and I thought they actually tried to beat us at our own game. Like, to me, the message all week had been, let's try and stop this contested game style and let's try and go through the middle and use different angles. And I actually thought our defence in transition was woeful in the first half, and it was probably deep into the second quarter where there was just a few balls starting to go into the full, and you could just see them starting to shit the bed, which was wonderful. But whatever was said at halftime, we came out and started playing the Collingwood brand that we've grown to know and love, and it's what wins games of footy for us. So, yeah, I think we, once again, probably won the tackle count convincingly and really brought the heat, but it was that forward half game and the turnovers there that you meant, that stat, scoring from turnovers in the front half, Nico, that's how we win. It's really simple. So it took a bit longer than I would have liked for us to really show up. But Jacko, what a way to break the game open.
Yeah, for sure. I think I was scratching my head at halftime wondering how the game would go, and I honestly thought there was potential for Carlton to keep destroying us through the middle, because up until that, although the scoreboard probably didn't reflect that, they were really carving us up in transition. It seemed like every time they had a kick in or a chip out from 10 metres out from our goal, they were able to go up the other end seamlessly and score. That was something, again, that Fly highlighted in his presser that he showed vision of at halftime. Our transition defence just wasn't there, and that's a whole team thing. So it was nice to know that we could we could rectify that at halftime and come out and continue to apply pressure, and then the rest of it unfolds the way it does. But again, don't want to speak too much about on Carlton, but just their inability to then find a second gear and push back after we shut down that period of the game. I think it'd be interesting to see how that would go against a top tier side in the competition, whether or not they're then able to find different avenues to score and how we would then respond to that. That's something that we're probably only going to find out later in the season. But I was perplexed by that and was shocked that was really Carlton's one wood and their only golf club they had in the bag, it seemed, because they had no way to score after half time.
They didn't have a Collingwood in their set of clubs, did they?
No, they absolutely didn't. Yeah, we're pretty handy. Our golf bag looks pretty good, Nick Daicos.
Well, speaking of Nick, he turned it on in the second half. Got to give credit to George Hewitt, who did a pretty good job on him in those opening 2 quarters. But we know what Nick's workhorse-like mentality is, and he wasn't going to let that get in the way throughout the final 2 terms, and he just went off and had a terrific impact on the contest.
Second half, him, Pendles and Shooter, I swear to God, they just, in that first 5 minutes, really set the tone. And I don't know, again, what was said by Fly, if it's 0-0 again, gents, we need to come out and act like we're playing the first bounce of the game. But Nick was definitely showing promise in the first half. I think he had the 10 touches, which is quiet for him, but wearing a tag. And then to come out and just basically shake that and find a new gear was super impressive. And I think as he matures and gets more attention, what I'm learning is that as much as I wanted to see him get the individual accolades, he's becoming a better team player when he knows he's copping heat and he knows he's not going to have the 30, 35 disposals, but still finding other ways to get his teammates into the game. So just noting in this early part of the season, I don't think he'll have polled too many votes in the Brownlow, for example, even for the Copeland, for that matter. I've had some other great performers, but it's a sign of a strong team. And I think just reflecting on this podcast, how many times did we say Daicos 3 votes last year on our 3-2-1, and now it's like we've actually got a better spread to pick from. So just an emerging trend there, Nico.
It was always a concern, the fact that Nick was dominating so much in the midfield, and when he was absent, whether just off the ground or missing a couple of games, that absence was really felt. Looks like it's different this year, Jack.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the addition of blokes who we mentioned off the top, Ned Long, absolutely will go to assist that when he gets his opportunity to start from the get-go. But it's even interesting, I think, to watch the way in which teams go about going after Nick Daicos. We saw that melee at halftime where uncharacteristically almost, Sam Walsh sort of really fired up and tried to get into him, and it's been well documented that
you got tired of ball watching, did you?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but that has been documented that, as Marcus said, we love that. We love when teams go after Nick, and Nick loves it as well because it means he can play a new role and the team can go about attacking in a completely different mindset when the opposition is too zeroed in and too focused on Nick Daicos. But I love Marcus's point about, sort of looking back to last year and comparing it with our situation now, how many times we were just so reliant and so week in, week out, Nick Daicos 3 votes, Nick Daicos 3 votes, and what a luxury it is now sitting here 3 or 4 games of footy in, knowing that we know how good he can be and we know the levels that he can reach and that he's still having an impact, but in a completely different manner.
Speaking of still having an impact, Steele and Pendles. I mean, this is a sight to behold that we're up to round 4 and they have arguably been our top 3 most consistent and best players across the first month of footy. Steele Sidebottom was the number 1 ranked player on the ground, and that's after he was the number 1 ranked player on the ground in the second half against the Bulldogs a fortnight ago. I mean, the influence these two are having, gents, it's extraordinary to see. And there was so much talk about us being an old side, and we had the oldest 23 in history on Thursday night against Carlton, and we're still able to produce the performance we did, and it was still led by those two. And I think Jeremy Howe needs a bit of kudos as well for the way that he's played that first month. But, I mean, surely we just have to continue to marvel at the way that these older, more experienced heads are leading this side.
Without a doubt. I mean, it's the stuff that you don't expect at this point in their careers, but at the same time we do expect it because they're 2 of the club's greats, if not potentially number one being Pendles, and I think still could probably be top 10 considerations of all Collingwood players of all time as well. If we have that discussion, I guess the argument is it sustainable? And if Steele or Pendle's are rested or there's an injury there, who's coming into this midfield to still get the 25 touches, kick a goal, be clean around the contest, this sort of stuff? Because if one of them goes out, I think it's manageable. But if they both miss, then we may have an issue. So while it's fantastic to see them playing such incredible footy at this time in their careers, it's a luxury for us fans. It's also got to be measured against a very long season.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be interesting to see what this looks like post-bye and whether or not their bodies can hold up again unbelievably for, however many seasons consecutive they've been in the competition. Still, I would love to know what his off-season looked like at the end of 2024.
Fishing in Tallarook, I reckon.
This season. If it changed at all, it would just be amazing, because he seems like he's come back into this season so stronger than I've ever seen him. Breaking tackles last year, felt like he was getting caught. The old legs weren't perhaps evading as they once did, but this year it's a completely different game, and he seems to be standing his ground, shaking off folks who are 26 years old, in their prime of their physical lives. And yeah, it's just mesmerising to watch them go about their work week in, week out. But as Marcus said, it's going to be interesting come around 16, 17 to see if we're still having this same conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. In my eyes, let's just hope they continue to play like this for many, many years to come. Scott Pendlebury will jump into outright third, I should say, in the games played this
past
weekend
Burgoyne
as well. He will officially, so he tied Burgoyne on the weekend, or last weekend just gone. He'll be joining him this weekend.
How many until he breaks Boomer's record?
He's still got, off the top of my head, quick maths, 432, so 408. So he's got
next season.
Yeah, it's next season. It's about 24 games off the top of my head, roughly.
Cool. Yeah, so midway through next season, after, of course, we play 3 finals this year and win the
premiership, yeah.
But, just quickly, how's that little handball that he made to put McStay into space? I think we butchered the attempt at goal in the end, but that one, even against the Doggies, I think it was, where he just did it over his head and he hit Nick in the corridor.
Yeah.
And then that one just on the weekend, it's like he's just finding ways time and time again to not let the game go past him. So it's incredible stuff.
DC, we need to give him some credit here, because I said you wouldn't have heard me last week, but I did say that I was more worried about De Koning coming into the match than Paddy Cripps, and I knew that Darcy Cameron was going to be one that had to stand up, and he did in spades. 22 disposals, 8 clearances, 33 headouts, 6 marks, 5 tackles. He's arguably having a better year than he did last year, and he finished second in a Copeland Trophy. I know we're a biased Collingwood podcast, and I'm sure we'll get some funny looks, but is he in the conversation for All-Australian Ruckman at the moment?
I think Sherry and Meek probably having seasons that are slightly ahead, but he's in the peloton, no question about it. And I think that if either of those two, Ruckman plateau and DC continues to have the performances that he had, like to get TDK, it's a big scalp for him as a Ruckman who played one game at the Swans, came across, we didn't really know what we're going to get, and now he's covering the ground as well as any Ruckman in the league, I reckon, and his intercept marking is a serious asset for us. And
one that was pre-season 2025, we were really interested to see if he could back the season of 2024 up, and so far he absolutely has. His game on the weekend, I felt like probably encapsulated the way the Collingwood's game went in a way. I thought his first half, not shaky, but I felt like he was too much worried about what TDK was doing as opposed to worrying what he was doing and backing in his own strengths. And I'm not sure if there was a conversation at halftime regarding that, but it seemed like he came out after halftime and just really focused on what he was doing. Talking about, in the throw-ins, not looking back, watching where De Koning was, just going after the ball himself and essentially allowing De Koning to chase him instead of vice versa. But he was huge on Thursday night, Nico, and imperative to our win.
So I'll talk about the fact that he's looking like he's having a better year than last year. The stats are proving it so far, albeit a much smaller sample size, of course. But he's averaging 3 more clearances, 4 more possessions, and 0.5 more intercept marks than he did in his second in the Copeland Trophy season last year. So the impact is real right now with Darcy, which is great to see.
No doubt about it. And let's just hope that he at least makes the squad again. Because did he make the squad last season?
Yep.
Yeah, so let's hope he can go one better this year.
Absolutely. Just trying to look through. We'll speak about our forward line, because AskPiesNation is all about goal kicking accuracy or lack thereof at the moment, because we mentioned off the top that this could have been a 30, 40, 50-point win had we have been able to kick a little straighter. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I do want to highlight Brody Mychek because I do feel like he still had a solid encounter despite the fact that he kicked 0 goals, 3 for the match. He still had 7 marks, 4 of those were inside 50, and he had 2 contested, and he had 5 scoring involvements and had a couple of important plays early where he was able to shepherd on the goal line to allow some of those shorter balls to go through. But I have to admit, when I saw Jack Silvani line up on him, I had a good chuckle because I thought, okay, Brody's in for a big day. And I'm telling you, if those 3 behinds had been 3 goals, he'd be talked about much more this evening.
No doubt about it. And it's a good point. He was frustrating me, though, because you could just see it on his face when he's lining up, particularly that third one where he hit the post. I was just like, whatever's going on up above the shoulders is clearly just taking all of the energy away from the physical component of putting it through the big sticks, Jacko.
Yeah, for sure. And isn't it interesting when we talk about inaccuracy of goal kicking, it always starts off with those 50-50 ones, 45, 50 metres out. We all know they're more than capable of kicking them, but when they don't, and when you have ascendancy in the game, when you are dominating, we're not taking or capitalising on your good form, and then you start getting the ones closer and closer, and that Checkers one is just a pure example of that. It's one that he nails 9 times out of 10. Now in the conditions it's wet and all that stuff, but probably one of those ones, as Marcus said, was 90% above the shoulders and had missed it before he even made his approach.
He's shaking his head.
Yeah, anyway, we'll move on. Keen to hear what the fans have to say a little bit later on.
Absolutely. What were our thoughts on the forward line in general? I mean, Schultz was clearly a standout, and we'll touch on him very, very shortly because he deservingly gets some praise for his efforts on Thursday night. But in a similar way to what we're talking about with Nick in the midfield, Bobby Hill, very quiet night. Jamie Elliott, very quiet night. Bo McCreary, very quiet night, but not relied upon to see us have multiple opportunities on goal. Membry, average, obviously was able to make the most of it and had a great finish and was able to take some of those Carlton defenders out of the game. But what do we make as a general point of view about what that forward half unit looked like?
Yeah, first half not ideal in terms of pressure, but I still felt like they were working as a system, as a forward line to create opportunities, even though we weren't converting them in the second half. So I guess what's pleasing is that, like, for example, with that goal that Schultz kicked, where it was just like somehow the ball went over the defenders and just ended up in his lap and he ran into an open goal. It was a bit like a soccer goal almost, wasn't it, being crossed. But that involved our forwards, and I felt like they were creating repeat opportunities and still going to work to at least pressure the Carlton defence. And so the ball wasn't popping out as much, and we're retaining that forward half terrain. And I think that went a long way to us getting those repeat entries and not letting them out. Obviously, they were awful in terms of trying to counterpunch, but I guess it's a game where we look at our forward line that's been as robust as I'd say it's ever been in the last 10, 20 years. And even though Bobby Hill and some of the other guys you mentioned had extremely quiet nights, I felt that they, as a system, as a line, found ways to influence the game. Which
again is not something that could be said about last year, Nico. And I think it's exciting for me that you ask about what's your outlook on it. I think it's exciting because it reminds me a lot of our season in 2023 about how it just seemed to be week on week. It was someone different that was rising to the top and, essentially taking all the fruits of other people's labour or other people working in that system that Marcus talks about. So this week it was Shooter who was able to get on the end of a couple. Next week it might be Bobby Hill. The week after it might be Bo. So I think it's exciting, especially considering if you're an opposition coach or an opposition analyst trying to pick on who to go after or who to target for that week. Yes, this week they probably would have gone after Shooter had he not come into this game injured. But next week it might be Bobby Hill. It might be Bo McCreary.
Let's touch on Shooter because it was almost an identical game to what he had against the Bulldogs a fortnight ago. He finished with 18 disposals, 7 marks, 7 tackles and kicked 2 very important goals in that win. He's number 1 in the competition for tackles inside 50 per game and 8th in the competition for total marks inside 50. I mean, the resurgence that Shooter is having is phenomenal, and it's going to be an absolute shame that we're not having him at our disposal for the next 2 or 3 weeks after rupturing or doing a hamstring at training on Sunday, which
the luck
is
on the
shattering. But we still need to give him an absolute bucket full of praise because the way he's been able to turn this season around and have such an impact on this team is incredible, and shout out to him.
No doubt about it. He's been under the spotlight probably more than any other Collingwood player even though we've had some good footy played in the last couple of seasons, since he come to the club, he'd be the first person to say, and we've said it many times, just defining that role that's his, and he knows how to make it work. And I feel like him getting the accolade, the individual accolade of the Richard Pratt medal, is fantastic validation for the way he's gone about his footy and still going to work even though he wasn't getting the results and being process driven in that.
For sure, and I think we spoke about only a couple of weeks ago how it's his attitude and the way he's gone about it up until this point, providing pressure, tackling, just consistently putting repeat gut efforts in time and time again is what's going to be what gets him through this tough period and ultimately what defines him when the tide does turn. And in the last 2 weeks, we've seen the tide turn. For mine, he was best on ground against the Bulldogs. I thought he was absolutely exceptional and so good that despite having the week off, that he could come back in a massive game against the Blues and back that up again. And yeah, you can't help just feel like a warm feeling inside, I reckon, Nico, when Shooter does well, because he clearly just gives his all week in, week out. So nice to see him getting the rewards.
We're going to miss him for a couple of weeks, that's for sure. But so good to see all our players get around him the way they did when he won the Richard Pratt medal. I think not that there was an element of surprise by any stretch because he had a superb game, but just knowing what he's been through over the last 12, 15 months to see that recognition come to a fore against such a big side in a big game against Carlton, I think that was pretty pleasing to see.
Yeah, it's just another little signal of a connected footy team. Peter Daicos even going up to him afterwards to give him a big handshake and say, well done, Shooter. They're little things, but they just show the difference between how the chemistry of this side and being a connected group shows up compared to the other mob. I mean, look, they couldn't even look each other in the eye, I don't reckon, after the game, the performances they've been putting up, particularly against us. So just wrapped at Shooter's got this. I feel like it's almost a validation for him personally, and shocking news about the timing of the injury. Let's hope he's back for Anzac Day, Jacko.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be awesome to have him back on the big stage against the Dons. But one thing I just forgot to highlight just before was that mark that he takes early doors in the third term, essentially when the game's still up for grabs.
Pendles kicks it.
Yes.
Doherty doesn't go.
Absolutely, yeah.
Shooter does, yeah.
So that mark that he takes, we've spent so many times, I think even when we've been at the footy together, saying, he just has to kick these. This is his role. This is what he's here to do.
So glad you've brought this up.
He just has to kick these. And these are little things. It's just one kick, Nico. It's one kick, but these are the little tiny things in Shooter's game that when he nails them, it's absolutely massive for us. And, I don't know him on a personal level, but I'm sure it must be massive for his confidence as well and what that looks like. And, yeah, he seems like a really, really dangerous proposition. And I'd hate to be an opposition analysis. Hopefully he's ready and fit and firing for Anzac Day to give the Bombers a few headaches. But if not, we're looking forward to seeing him go about his work for the rest of the year.
And if you want something to do over the next few weeks, there's a spot right there on the couch if he wants to come and join us. We'd love to hear about it. Any other notes from this game before we wrap up?
Nah, just really pleased that we are on the ladder 3-1. It's just the sort of game where we don't want to be 2-2. We don't want to be in the peloton. We want to try and really get ahead early in the season and bank wins, which is what we've done.
Yeah, exactly right, Marcus. I think you only have to pass back your mind back to last year. Zipping 3, seems like the world's crashing around us, and now we sit here 3-1, I believe, and still hearing a lot of people pick apart our game and the way we're playing. But as Marcus just said, the important thing at this time of the year is just to keep making wins, ensure you're not falling behind the 8 ball, because come August, September, that's when you really start firing and you really start looking towards the business end of the season. So albeit this won't be one that we'll have in the memory bank a la some other Carlton games that we've had in recent memory, but one that no doubt was really good to get the 4 points and move on. All
right, let's get your votes in from Thursday night's game. How did we see the 3-2-1s this week?
3 votes. I've gone with Shooter. I've
starting 3, yep.
Could have raffled it, I reckon. Yes, mix it up this week. Why not? 2 votes. I've gone with DC for reasons already mentioned. Thought he was immense against the Coning. And look, the one was really hard between like a Josh Daicos or a Steele side, but I'm going to go with Steele.
Yep.
Thought that he was super clean once again and just showed up in the wet and got the job done, Jacko.
Yeah, well, funny. I actually went the opposite order to Marcus there. So I've given Shooter 1 vote. I thought the eye test on the night, I thought he was exceptional, got the best on ground medal, but just being there, I felt like someone else deserved to get the 2 and 3 votes. Gave 2 to DC for the exact same reasons. Solid all night, especially after half time. When he started focusing on what he was doing and not what DeConing was doing, that's where I really felt like we felt the full impact of DC. And I actually gave 3 to Steele. Maybe it's because I'm so amazed at the way he's going about it. Just his impact at his age and his strength on Thursday night was just amazing. And yeah, he's winding back the clock week in, week out. And geez, if he keeps doing that, Nico, he could be 18 again by the time we get to round 23.
All right, we'll take that. Not going to go into too much detail, but 1 to Steele, 2 to DC, and 3 to Lachie Schultz. You guys have pretty much been spot on with your analysis there over the last couple of minutes, so that's how I saw it. Before I move on quickly, any thoughts on Billy Frampton coming back into the side and his role on Charlie Curnow?
I think that if Harry played, we'd be saying potentially different things about Frampton's game and Darcy Moore's game. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
I think there's a lot in that, Marcus, but I did had some notes on Billy Frampton because he was going to be the pilot that caught my eye.
Okay. You've done some notes. Come on.
If Darcy wasn't selected, but
come on.
He's one of these blokes that's come in and played this role before. I think the first time he played for us was against Richmond, I believe, on a Friday night, and all he had to do was stick in Tom Lynch's back pocket and stop him from marking the ball. And I think when Billy Frampton's role is simplified to that, it's where he really excels for us, especially in the back line. We've obviously seen him on Grand Final Day play the defensive forward role, but yeah, I was really impressed with his game on Thursday night, Nico. I think there's absolutely a role for him continuing, especially given the form that Darcy Moore is in and Jeremy Howe, that he can just come in and all he has to do is stop the elite forwards of the competition. You know, talking to Charlie Curnow, sorry. Of course, you know, this is caveated by the fact Curnow probably comes into this game relatively underdone. Yeah. His partner in crime, Harry Mackay, is not there. We're very effective, the residual effect that has when both of those boys are playing in the same team. However, why not just when we come up against a Jeremy Cameron, when we come up against watching games from the weekend, a Max King or a Riley Thilthorpe, for example, Nico, why not just bring in Billy Frampton and say, mate, your job today is just to stop him from marking the ball. And I think he's more than up to the task.
Absolutely. I like it. Great stuff. Maybe he should have been the pilot of your eye.
Maybe.
With the way you've just given him that rap. All right, let's move to AskPiesNation, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, TikTok, everything. Be sure to continue to get involved with AskPiesNation. We love hearing from you, as we always do. This question was based around our goal kicking. We just touched on it a little bit before. Why has our goal kicking been so off over the last few matches? And why is it a concern leading up to some of the big games? So let's hear what some of our fans had to say. Paul Bailey on Facebook. 2 years ago when we won the flag, we were a lot more composed and accurate. Need more goals than points if we want to get into September. I mean, gee, funny.
Some Robert Walls type commentary there. More goals than points. Very good.
Pies are, this is from Easts to Win 1994 on Twitter. Pies are 13th in the AFL for average goals kicked per game. They're last for behinds kicked on average, which is bad. I think he means first on average, which is bad.
We're the most inaccurate side is what I'm inferring from that one, yes.
Well, it's funny because there was a comment here that I've just lost it. I'm going to get it up because I found it pretty funny. I've got to get it up. But anyway, as I'm going through, it'll probably come up again.
But like, why is it, Jacko, that Membry comes out against the Power and slots 3 in the first term, and then the whole team seems to be unable to miss, and then in the last 2 games of footy, it's like the shoes on the other foot?
I think it's just
that?
I think it's just infectious.
Yes,
it's infectious. It's a disease, and it goes both ways as well. Because in that Port game, it seemed like no one could miss. Likewise with the pre-season game against the Tigers, where I don't think we kicked a behind until late in the 4th term in that game. But it is infectious. Good footy is infectious, and so is bad footy. And it's funny because I mentioned it before, but it does start with the ones that are sort of 50-50 chances, where it's like, oh, he's capable of kicking this, and we need him to kick this in the game right now. But then they miss, and then we get a closer one, and then that doesn't quite make the journey, and then all of a sudden you're lining up with one that absolutely should be kicked, and the pressure that's on that kick in that moment just takes control. And yeah, we saw it with Checkers on Thursday.
Severe case
on Thursday night. But yeah, it's infectious, and it's just one of those things that you've just got to nip in the butt, I think, from quarter one.
I heard, so this is the tweet I mentioned, Scott Purcell. I heard on Thursday night's TV coverage that we were ranked 17th for goal scoring accuracy. I was actually amazed there's another team that are worse.
Who's that?
Exactly. I don't know who the worst would be. I don't know. Maybe a West Coast.
Can't be Melbourne because they're not actually getting shots on goal. So
nor the Blues. Yeah.
Blair Squish's grapes. The cliche is poor kicking is poor footy, but Thursday was putrid. The reward for effort currently is a disappointing groan as we watch another sprayed kick hit a post. No doubt it will cost us a game if we don't sharpen up. So,
but it hasn't so far, Nico, which is important to note, which I think this time last year it might have cost us 1 or 2 early.
Yeah. Darian Jones, pleasing where we are having a decent amount of shots on a goal on a game. Yes, missing a lot, but still winning though. If that's corrected, even 25%, we will be bloody tough to beat for any side. So yes, maybe not too much of a correction. The real Ollie Deng, I feel since 2023, most of our players or forwards goal kicking has been concerning. I think it's pressure too. Even Jamie Elliott has been missing ones that he would normally kick. You know what? He's kicked the 3 most important goals he's needed to over the last 3 years. If he misses every other shot on goal for the rest of his life, I couldn't care one bit because he's done it when it mattered.
True.
I'm a firm believer Jamie Elliott needs the game to be on line for him to get his goal kicking boots on.
John Caxos on Instagram, I'd give them a mulligan for the Blues game. Conditions were pretty difficult. None of our players are chronic poor goal kickers. I think they'll iron out their routines as the year progresses. Thought our defence looked as elite as it did in 2023. That's been my main concern on the season. I think all up, considering the numerous changes to our team lineup and a difficult draw, I had us hitting our strides come out of Anzac Day. So to be sitting at 3-1 at this stage without showing our best is heartening.
Yeah, do you think amongst Collingwood people that we would have after 4 rounds tipped 3-1, or do you think more people were 2-2?
I'll have to check what we had in our preview show.
Not as confident as what's happened, is that what you're saying?
After my experience in Sydney, I didn't have us winning a game until July, so this is a great result.
Yeah, I get what you mean though, absolutely.
Yeah.
Nick on Instagram, it's our Achilles heel. Momentum plays such a big part in today's football. If you can't capitalise on your opportunities in front of goal, you leave the door open for the opposition. Too often we have done that, so yep, I mean very similar to what we've been talking about. I'll finish quickly with Brock Daicos, not goal kicking related. Fingers crossed the audio works this week, gents. I think we're doing okay so far. Yep, there's a thumbs up. So there we go. Yes, you will actually hear us this time. But that's a small snippet of what our fans brought regarding to goal kicking. So thank you for everybody that does continue to get involved. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, TikTok is where you can find us and continue to get involved. So thank you very much for that. Moving on, we spoke, I think last week, about the fact that we've had nobody yet give us the correct tip margin. And finally, I can say, not only have we had some people correctly guess how much, we've had nine people across all our social media platforms correctly guess the exact amount of margin we would win by. Maybe they just all thought we were going to win by 40. I said we were going to win by 6, but 17 was how much we ended up winning by. So we got Chris on Twitter. We got Jacob Sparks on Twitter, Antonio Rivera on Twitter, Beck Barbin on Instagram, Harry Fernal on Instagram, Jaden Macaro on Instagram, Will Mack 17 on Instagram. I'm not saying that name, but Pies by 17 fire emoji on Instagram. Tolly Nuasis, Pies by 17. So yes, great shout out to everybody that got within that margin. So pretty good. 17, we were expecting that. I mean, again, we talked about the fact that it probably should have been a 40-point game, but
I certainly wasn't, Nico. Again, mentioned it a few times, but blown away by how much of this game we were able to dominate. And unfortunately, it wasn't the percentage booster that it possibly could have been, but oh well.
Absolutely. All right, time for Guess the Crowd. That's back and still rocking in our new studio. So we're going to chuck the headphones on. We're going to chat to Dylan, who was 42 people off the crowd. Ended up being 82,000 odd, Jacko. I think still a little bit disappointing, again, considering the fact that we were told from the start it was a sold-out game. Ends up being 82,000.
It was disappointing, Nico. Thursday night, though, it's such a... I was really shocked by the AFL's decision to make this game a Thursday night contest. It just seems like a bit of a waste, really, I think, considering especially when you look at the crowds that these two sides have been able to collate on the Friday, Saturday night fixture with everyone from work being able to get there. Really shocked by the fact we had to play on a Thursday night. It's tough for people if they have to travel a long distance to make it in, but is what it is, and good effort by the Pies Army to get 80,000, I thought, actually.
All right, so we're going to give Dylan a call. As we said, 42 people off the crowd, so let's give him a buzz and chat about the Mighty Pies.
Pies Nation boys, how are we?
Yes, very good, Dylan. How are you going, mate?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Well, welcome to the Pies Nation podcast, and congratulations on being our Guess the Crowd competition winner for this week. You weren't that far off getting the correct crowd, mate. We need to know the method to the madness.
Yeah, I've been looking at a couple of the Thursday games this year, and they've all been sitting around 80K for the bigger sides. And I figured Carlton's going like a basket case at the moment, so all their bandwagoners have probably jumped off, so I chucked it, low 80s. It was close.
Yeah, you certainly were. Only 42 people off. Now, Dylan, were you one of those 82,000 odd to make your way to the G? And regardless, always like to get the thoughts off the bat about how we went in the previous game. And whilst it might not be the most memorable one, certainly love to hear how you thought the Pies got the job done on Thursday.
Yeah, so I was there. I sit in Bay M30 there, so shout out to all the Pies members there.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought it was a slow start by us, but it was, surprisingly wet weather, which I wasn't expecting. So, and they always only show up for the first half. So, I thought we started a bit slow, but that third quarter was just clinical by us and back to our best and clean in the wet. And I thought Darcy Cameron, he sort of struggled early to get into the game against the Koning and then just worked him out of it and dominated that second half. So, I think that was a big shift for us in the midfield once he started tapping it down to Nick. And we started getting some of the clearances and getting on top there. So,
Thanks.
Yeah, it was not our traditional game, but it was, good win in the end.
Thanks, Dylan, for your analysis. Very consistent with our thoughts so far tonight on the pod. Mate, look, just want to stick with our form for now. How do you see where we're at as a club at the moment? This time last year, it was struggle street, couldn't really get a win on the board, and there's still criticism of the way we're playing our footy at the moment, inaccurate goal kicking, etc. Is there still a lot of improvement in this group? Is this as good as this group's can go at the moment? Or is this just a matter of we've got to keep banking the wins and start playing the real footy come September?
Look, I think it's a bit of everything. I think we're playing pretty good, I think, but we still got a lot of improvement where we can neaten up our game a bit, especially in front of the goals and kicking a bit straighter. That's been a bit of an issue in some of our games. But no, I think we're building nicely. And I think last year we just had such an interrupted preseason that we're too slow to get going. Because if you look at the back end, we started banking the wins late and almost made a run for finals, but just ran out of time in the end. So no, I think we're going well. I think we'll build nicely. The injury update that's just come out hurts us a little bit, but I think with the goalie, we're probably going to try and manage him a bit over the year anyway. Shooter's a big out. I think he does so much for us that you don't see necessarily on the TV, but at the games, watching him off the ball and his pressure, that's a massive out for us. So against the two grand finalists, it's going to be a tough couple of weeks, but hopefully we can bank at least one of those wins.
Very nice summary. Thanks for joining us, Dylan. Marcus here. 3-1. We sit at 3-1. Is that a pass? And tell me what our record will be after Anzac Day.
I think it's definitely a pass. I think I don't know if I'm recalling this correctly, but I don't think we've ever won at NG Stadium. So I'm giving opening round to just wipe off in a mulligan. So I think 3-1 is definitely good for now. I think after Anzac Day, if we're 5-2, I think that's a big tick for the start of our season. I think we'll be looking nicely into the second or middle part of it.
Yeah, certainly can. We've got some big matches coming up, of course. Well, tell us a bit about how you feel like it's trending towards the remainder of the season. I mean, 3-1, obviously a great place to be, and you talked about potentially being 5-2 with some of those opponents coming up. But what parts of our game do you feel like have really stood out to you in our hopes of getting back to not just being a top 8 side and making up the numbers, but to actually increasing our status as a contender? And maybe if there's a couple of plays you want to highlight in that as well, what has been something that's caught your eye in terms of how we've played our footy compared to what it was 12 months ago when we were struggling a little bit more?
I think we just struggled to get our running game going, like our DNA of 2023 and 2022 when we were running off the half back and just causing teams a lot of headaches by breaking lines. I think we just struggled to get back to that last year, and whether that was personnel missing or just lack of preseason or whatever it was, I think we're starting to get that going, which is really showing. And getting Houston on the half back, just like a quarterback with clean foot skills, has been a huge improvement. I know he's out for the next couple of weeks, which sucks, but I think that's going to help build us. And once all the new guys click a bit more, like Perryman's doing a massive job in the midfield with tagging roles. He was massive on Cripps on the weekend and Walsh in that second half. He sort of nullified him after he was getting going. So we just have a lot more facets to our game now that we probably didn't even have in our premiership year. I think we were using Sidey to tag as tagging roles in that year, which is exciting because that'll help us against the teams that have those stars and should help us again this week against Sydney.
Very nice, Dylan. Last one from me. You've got Severio Rocker, Anthony Rocker, or Travis Cloke. Who are you sending down to fix the goal-kicking troubles?
I'm taking big Anthony Rocker. I grew up in the 2000s, and watching him and Didac dominate that forward line was some of my favourite memories as a Pies fan. So, yeah, give me Anthony Rocker.
Very good.
It's stiff to put Travis Cloke in that mix. Shout out to him. But if he's someone that we want fixing our goal kicking issues, I'm not sure.
That was part of the gag there.
Yeah, good job. All right, well,
maybe
Dylan,
so I was just going to say, maybe if Clokey's about 50 metres out, I'll take him. But anywhere within about 30, I'm probably not going to take.
No.
Yeah. Very, very good. Dylan, it's been wonderful to have you as part of the Pies Nation podcast, mate. Thank you for your support and well done on being our guest at Crowd Competition winner. Hopefully we get to celebrate some Pies wins throughout the year.
No, thanks very much for having me on, boys. Love the pod, and hopefully we'll enjoy a beer after number 17 this year.
Sounds like a plan.
On you, Dylan.
Mate.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
That was Dylan joining us as part of the Pies Nation podcast. That could be you if you guess closer to the crowd, so keep an eye out for Lukey's post every single week. And if you are closest to the pin, that will be you joining us for a segment of the Pies Nation podcast.
When I was in Dylan's position, Marcus, as one of the fortunate people to get called from
ask you?
Pies Nation, no, you weren't on that week, but I was asked about who my favourite player was, and I mentioned Travis Cloke as one of my favourite players, because he was. I thoroughly enjoyed watching the big fella go about his work, albeit couldn't watch what he was doing anytime he was within 30 metres of goal, as
That's funny.
Dylan so aptly highlighted there.
All right, a couple of notes before we wrap up our show. Got to touch on the VFL, Marcus, because the Pies continue their winning ways after a very refreshing bye on the last couple of weeks. We defeated Coburg, a very high-scoring encounter, and we moved to 2-0.
We do, and we'll get the full wrap from the Surge.
Yes, Surge has been
very
there.
good. Yeah, it was a shootout, Nico. It was one of probably more high-scoring games you'll see at VFL level. Pies running away after three-quarter time. Some good performances. Was it West and also Finn McRae on return with the 26 and 2. But for the full scoop, without further ado.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
Surge.
Well, he gave me a couple of highlights. I won't go into full depth because it's about 3 pages long. We love the Surge about what he does, but I don't want to go into too much depth. What I will say is a couple of notes that he did highlight was Charlie West and Mason Cox. Their goal kicking and their contested marking was superb. So I think Maso might be pushing a little bit for some selection with a couple of key players out in the next week or so. We had 7 individual goal kickers, so a great spread beyond the 100-point mark. Cochrane and JT in defence is proving to be a great use. They're providing some great run and some great rebounding. And he's mentioned Mason Cox twice, so he must really think that he was having a superb game. 3 goals and 10 touches. I think he was terrific all around. So good to see Mace have such a big impact. Do we see him come back into this side, Jack?
I'm not sure, Nico. It's sort of a funny one. I mean, we're going to have plenty of outs. I think 3 forced changes this week through injury and suspension, but I just don't see how any of those changes will mean that Mason comes back in, unfortunately, just due to positional outcomes, if you like. But yeah, it's nice to know that Mason is still competing in the VFL and still having good games, because we know with the likes of Dan McStay, who can be injury prone at times, Tim Emery, who's aging, and likewise with Brodie Myercheck, that if any of those boys go down, he can slot straight back in.
Finn McRae and Oleg Markov also making their VFL season debuts. How good was Oleg's celebration? Did you guys see that?
I did. That was awesome.
The Sealer.
Yeah, the Sealer. He certainly made everybody aware over at Coburg City Oval, or whatever they call it now, Piranha Park, or whatever sponsor they're going with. So thank you to the Surge. We'll get you some more in-depth analysis as the season goes on. But guess what, Marcus? We don't have another game this week.
No, there's no VFL this week.
Oh.
You've just told me. So I was trying to figure out what was going on. We had another bye after another game. But look, we sit 2-0. We do play Brisbane when we come back on Friday, April 18. So another week off for the VFL boys, Nico. But looking forward to continue our weekly reports once they return.
Absolutely.
What date was that on, Marcus? What day was it? Friday, was it?
I believe so.
Yeah, right. After the AFL boys this year, who of course will play on the Thursday night, Easter Thursday against the Lions
good.
at the
They're doing
Gabba.
a bit of a Good Friday clash, so that should be interesting. All right. we like to finish with a game, and I've got a new one for you. And I want your input on it. I think you guys might actually go okay this time. So I'll run through it. Just give me your best answers here.
Okay.
I'm going to give you 6 players. I need you to tell me which 3 played more than 25 Collingwood games and which 3 played less than 25 Collingwood games.
Oh, I like this stuff.
Got it? All right. Your 6 players in no particular order. Clinton Young, Brad Dick, Cameron Cloke, Quinton Lynch, Simon Buckley, Tyler Brown.
Is there a few we can cross off that definitely played more? I want to say Clinton Young definitely played more than 25 games for us.
Okay, so there's one in the more than. Tyler Brown?
Tyler Brown, 25 games for the Pies. He's one that I think is going to be right on the cusp.
Okay, so...
Well, they all are, just to help you out. Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Really? Is Clinton Young that close? I know he's played... we're staying with our answer.
Yep.
He's definitely played more, but...
So, yep.
Who else have we got? So we've got Clinton Young and...
So,
Tyler
Clinton
Brown.
Young, Brad Dick, Cameron Cloke, Quinton Lynch, Simon Buckley, Tyler Brown.
Cameron Cloke.
I want to say Simon Buckley less than.
Okay.
I want to say Quinton Lynch more than. Did he play more than one season with us, or he had that finger?
Yeah. He's going Twin
Kept
Towers
missing.
with Travis there for a while.
And then Jesse White, he would have been less than, wouldn't he? He's not on the list, so it doesn't matter. All right, we're going to go Clinton Young above, Tyler Brown above. What you got?
Oh, there would have been a few games in that COVID thing, but my gut says under.
Okay.
I'm trying to read Nico's poker face,
It's
which
very good.
has developed over
Yes.
the past few
It's only
weeks.
getting better.
Maybe it's a surprising one. I'm not sure. Who are the others? Brad Dick and Simon.
So Brad Dick, Cameron Cloke, and Tyler Brown are the 3 you haven't chosen yet.
Do you think Cameron Cloke would have played over?
Over.
So we've got
And
Clinton
Brad
Young and...
So you've got Cameron Cloke, Clinton Young, and Quinton Lynch as over at the moment. This
And
will
then-
mean if you've got Brad Dick, Simon Buckley, and Tyler Brown under.
Can we swap Brad Dick and Q-Stick?
Okay. So you've got Quinton Lynch under,
Yeah.
Brad Dick. Okay, so
Otherwise, it's just going to go on and on and on.
okay.
I'd rather be wrong now.
So your 3 overs are Brad Dick, Cameron Cloke, and Clinton Young. Yes.
Yep.
And your 3
Sure.
unders are Quinton Lynch, Simon Buckley, and Tyler Brown.
With
Yep.
the one to make us save face a little bit, I think the Tyler Brown one could go.
Okay.
Is the one that could go then one way or the other.
You got 1 correct.
Who is...
It's
What?
better than none, which has been the flavour of the month.
Yeah.
So you got Brad Dick right. He did play more than 25. He played 27.
Clinton Young didn't play more than 25 games for Collingwood. Are
Clinton
you
Young
kidding?
did play 21 Collingwood games.
What?
Cameron Cloke played 21 Collingwood games. Quinton Lynch you got right as in... So you got 1 right
On
as
each
in 1
side.
more. Yep.
Yeah,
So
okay.
Quinton Lynch played less. He played 18 Collingwood games, just a 1 season. You were right. Simon Buckley played 26 and Tyler Brown played 26.
Really?
Yep.
There you go. I'd love to know how many games of Tyler Brown's were in that sort of 2020, 2021 period.
He was a star in the making.
Yeah, when
Tyler
we were
Brown.
going through that COVID period. But yeah,
Right,
another one that's going to make us feel like we've got absolutely no idea about the football club that we so dearly love.
All right.
Because we don't.
Well, on that note, that's going to do for this week's episode of the Pies Nation podcast. Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Marcus, for joining me on the couch.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, boys. Great to be in the new studio, Nico. It's awesome.
Until next week, I've been Nicholas Sacco. You've been listening to or watching the Pies Nation podcast, where the pies are hot and the drinks are cold.